This story is titled, My Name Tag Said Disappointment. I toasted them one last time, then left forever. Hi, everyone. Before we dive a quick favor. If you enjoy content like this, please hit the subscribe button. It's free, supports the channel, and make sure you never miss out on amazing video. Alright, let us get started. At my dad's birthday party, the name tag waiting for me didn't just have my name on it. It read, The Disappointment. My stepmom let out a laugh and said, well, it's not wrong. So I stood up, tapped my glass with my finger, and said calmly, I'd like to propose a toast to the last time any of you will ever see me. Dad nearly choked on his drink, but the real shock hit when I turned around and walked out the door, leaving behind one final message without needing to say another word. I am 32, and if you asked my father to describe me, he'd probably call me the biggest letdown of his life. Not because I broke any laws or ended up jobless. Not because I messed up my life in any real way, but simply because I chose a different path, one that didn't fit into the blueprint he laid out for me. My dad, James, has always been a man who needs to be in control. He's obsessed with keeping up appearances and demands loyalty from family, as long as that loyalty serves his interests. My parents split up when I was 10. It wasn't a messy divorce, at least not on the surface, but Dad moved on fast. Within a year, he married Stephanie, a woman who already had 2 kids, Hunter and Olivia, from her first marriage. That was the moment things began to shift. In the beginning, I really tried. I was just a kid who wanted her dad to be happy. Stephanie played nice, but it was that phony kind of sweet. She turned everything into a performance, always hugging me too tight in front of others and saying things like, I just know we're going to be best friends. But behind closed doors, it was clear where her heart really was, with her own kids. My dad, who used to be so involved in my life, slowly drifted away. He stopped being my dad and started acting like he belonged to them instead. It started with little things. He'd skip my soccer games, but somehow always be front row for Hunters. He'd forget to pick me up from school, but he never missed Olivia's dance recitals. Then it got worse. By the time I turned 14, I was expected to babysit them, do extra chores they were never asked to do, and play the perfect big sister while they got to run wild. And if I dared to complain, Dad would let out a dramatic sigh, like I was some burden, and say, they need you more, you're older, try to be mature. Stephanie? She didn't bother with the guilt trips. She just flat out called me selfish. The breaking point came when I found out my dad had emptied the savings account my mom had set up for me, money that was supposed to go toward my college tuition. My mom fought tooth and nail in court to get it back, but the damage was already done. I was angry beyond words. During my senior year of high school, I barely spoke to him. And when I left for college, paid for entirely on my own, I only came back on rare holidays. Over the years, our relationship never healed. He'd still invite me to family gatherings, but it always felt more like checking a box than genuinely wanting me there. To Dad and Stephanie, I was just the rebellious one who refused to play along with their happy family act. Meanwhile, Hunter and Olivia could do no wrong. They were the stars. Which brings us to his birthday bash. Stephanie went all out with one of those over-the-top parties where they invite everyone they have ever met. I wasn't planning on showing up, but my aunt, the one person in the family who's always been in my corner, talked me into it. Just drop by for a bit, she said. Maybe things are different now. Spoiler alert, they weren't. The second I walked through the door, I felt it, that familiar, cold tension. People I hadn't seen in ages were there, but instead of hugs or hellos, I got stiff nods and quick glances. The room buzzed with small talk, but no one really pulled me in. I spotted my dad chatting it up with old friends, laughing like nothing in the world could touch him. But when his eyes landed on me, his smile flickered for just a second, like he was surprised I bothered to show up. Regret was already sinking in when I noticed a small table by the entrance. It was the name tag table. Stephanie had done this at past events, said it helped people mingle. Typical her. Most tags were ordinary. Uncle Mark, Cousin Rachel, Neighbor Tom. Then I saw mine and froze. It didn't just have my name. It had something else too. Something that turned my stomach. I picked it up, staring at it, and across the room, I heard a laugh I knew all too well. Stephanie's. She stood there with a wine glass in hand, watching me with a smug little grin. My fingers curled around the name tag as heat crept up my neck. This wasn't going to play out the way she thought it would. I stood there a beat longer, staring at what I held. My name was there, sure, but right underneath, in smaller print, someone had written The Disappointment. At first, I thought maybe it was just a cruel joke, a tasteless prank, maybe one of my cousins being dumb, or maybe a mix-up. But then I heard her laugh again. Stephanie. I looked up and spotted her at the bar, sipping her wine without a care in the world. When our eyes met, she gave me a slow, smug smile like she had just won something. I felt the blood pounding in my ears. A few people had started noticing me now. Some glanced over. No one said a word, but I could feel it, the pressure. The unspoken warning, don't make a scene. I took a deep breath, set the name tag back on the table, and straightened it out neatly beside the others. For a moment, I almost laughed. Of course she did something like this. This was textbook Stephanie. Not something obviously mean, nothing loud or public enough to get her in trouble. Just sneaky enough that if I reacted, I would look like the dramatic one. I should have seen it coming the moment I stepped through that door. Then I felt a gentle hand on my shoulder. I turned to see my aunt, the only one in the room who ever truly understood me. Her eyebrows were tight, her mouth a thin line. She had seen it. Her eyes darted towards Stephanie. "You okay?" she asked softly. I forced a smile. "Yeah," I said. "I'm fine." But I wasn't. I was worn out in a way I couldn't even describe. Because this wasn't new. Not by a long shot. It was just the latest chapter in a long, exhausting book of her reminding me I would never truly belong. I should have left right then and there. I should have turned around and walked out. But something in me refused. Not this time. So I pulled in a breath, rolled back my shoulders, and did something that I knew none of them were expecting. I smiled. A real, calm smile like nothing had happened. Then I snagged a glass of champagne from a passing tray, tapped my nail lightly on the side, and turned toward the crowd. If Stephanie wanted drama, I was going to give her something better. I raised the glass just a little, feeling the room shift as a few heads turned my way. I hadn't made a scene yet, but the soft clink of my nail had drawn just enough eyes. Just enough attention to make Stephanie freeze for a second before taking another long sip of her wine, as narrowing like she was trying to guess what I was up to. I let the silence hang just long enough to make them wonder if I was about to speak, then gave a small shake of my head and drifted deeper into the room. I wasn't going to let her win. Not by reacting. Not yet. The party was exactly what I expected, crowded, stiff, way too polished. Fancy catering, overdone decor, and a vibe that screamed performance. Stephanie didn't just throw parties. She staged productions. This wasn't about celebrating Dad's birthday. It was about showing off. Showing people how perfect her life was, how adored she and Dad were, how successful their children had become. Not me. Their real children, Hunter and Olivia. I spotted them center stage, soaking up the attention. Olivia was surrounded by relatives, flashing her ring and gushing about her upcoming wedding. And of course, Dad's paying for everything, she chirped, twirling her massive diamond. "We just want something classy, you know? Nothing tacky like those Pinterest weddings." I nearly laughed. That was Olivia, always polished, always rehearsed. Just self-centered enough to make everything orbit around her without seeming too obvious about it. Hunter stood by the bar, soaking up praise from Dad's friends about his shiny new job, one I was almost positive he didn't earn. He never worked for anything. Every break he ever got came straight from Dad, and every mess he made got quietly cleaned up. I was tempted to waltz over and insert myself into their little echo chamber, just to watch the reaction. But before I could move, I heard Dad's voice. Well, he said. I turned to see him walking toward me with a drink in hand and a blank expression. "I didn't think you'd actually show." I gave him a polite smile, nothing genuine. "Wouldn't miss it." He nodded, glancing around before looking back at me. "Been keeping busy, I hear." There it was. That typical, distant way he asked about my life. Never directly, never curious. Just polite. I nodded. "Yeah. Work's good. I bought a house last year." His eyebrows lifted just slightly. "A house?" "Yep." He took a slow sip of his drink and didn't say another word. That was always the thing with my dad. He never liked when I did something that made it harder for him to keep seeing me as the disappointment he'd decided I was. Every time I accomplished something without leaning on him for help, no money, no favors, it chipped away at the story he told himself about me. The one where I was irresponsible, aimless, and not worth taking seriously. And that narrative? It was his favorite. He liked having a version of me that he could sigh about when people asked. A version he could describe with a shake of the head and a tone full of fake sympathy. I could see him searching for something to say, trying to come up with a little jab that wouldn't sound too obvious. But before he could open his mouth, Stephanie's voice cut in sharp and loud like a blade. "Well," she said, stepping up beside him, flashing a grin that showed every tooth in her mouth. At least she finally did something responsible. And just like that, I felt that familiar burn rising in my chest again. I turned toward her, and there she was, smiling wide, acting like she was just thrilled to see me. But I knew that look. I'd seen it more times than I could count. Stephanie had mastered the art of the insult disguised as concern, the kind of woman who could slap you with a smile and then tell everyone you were just too sensitive. Because it was always a joke. You were always overreacting. I should have walked away. I should have let it roll off my back. But I didn't. Because something about that night felt different. Off. Like the whole room was one giant reminder that I didn't belong there. Maybe it was the cruel name tag. Maybe it was how my dad barely acknowledged me before finding an excuse to tune me out. Maybe it was just standing in a room full of people who had never truly felt like family. Whatever it was, I had hit my limit. I turned towards Stephanie, tilting my head with a small, casual smile. You know, I said lightly, I was going to ignore it. But I've got to ask, whose brilliant idea was the name tag? I caught a flicker of something in her expression, just for a second. A crack in the mask. Oh, come on, she said with a laugh, brushing it off. You're always so sensitive. It was meant to be funny. I nodded slowly. Right. Super funny. She took a sip of wine and shrugged like she was giving advice. You know, maybe if you weren't so angry all the time, you'd. I held up a finger to stop her right there. Actually, I said, keeping my tone calm and steady, you're right. Her eyes narrowed slightly. About what? About telling a joke, I said, turning slightly, raising my glass as I did. Because now that I think of it, I've got one, too. She blinked, caught off guard. I noticed my father shift beside her, clearly uneasy now. And then, slowly, I smiled. Easy. Controlled. I'd like to make a toast. Just like that, the noise in the room began to soften. Not all at once, but little by little, the conversations around us faded as heads began to turn, curiosity pulling everyone's attention toward me. People love a toast, especially one they weren't expecting. I felt my dad tense up next to me. Stephanie let out a small, nervous laugh and shifted her weight, like she was trying to dismiss it before it gained momentum. Oh, come on, she said. You don't have to do that. I raised my hand slightly, still smiling. No, really. I insist. The atmosphere shifted. People began turning toward me, murmurs floating through the room. Some guests picked up their drinks, ready for what they assumed would be a sweet or funny little speech. They had no idea what I was about to say. Stephanie's smile had started to strain. She was still holding on to the belief that I was the same girl she'd always known, the one who kept her mouth shut, who let everything slide, who never pushed back. But Dad? He wasn't so sure. I saw it in his face. He knew me better than she did. His knuckles whitened around his glass, and for the first time that night, he didn't look past me or through me. He looked right at me. I let the silence stretch just a bit longer, letting that tension build, then lifted my glass and spoke. To my father, I said lightly, like it was any other toast. And to Stephanie, of course. Because if it weren't for them, I don't think I ever would have learned one of the most important lessons of my life. I paused, taking a deliberate sip from my glass. Stephanie let out a breathy little laugh, like she was still pretending this was a harmless story. Oh boy, here we go. A few guests chuckled with her. They thought this was all just a bit of fun. They figured I was going to laugh at myself, crack a joke, smooth it all over like I usually did. But I didn't. I smiled. No, really. I mean it. Because sometimes, the people who challenge you the most are the ones who end up teaching you the biggest lessons, don't you think? I turned to look at my father. Dad, you always used to say that family should lift each other up, that we should be each other's support system, that we should celebrate one another's wins. I saw his throat tighten as he swallowed hard. His grip on his glass had gone stiff. He didn't like where this was heading. And I used to believe that, I said, my voice steady. I really did. But then at some point it hit me. The room had gone almost completely still. You could feel it in the air. Stephanie's fingers were clenched so tightly around her wine glass. I half expected it to crack in her hand. I gently set my own glass on the table next to me. I'd realized something that night, something I probably should have figured out a long time ago. Some people only offer support if you fit into the version of you that they've created in their heads. As long as you play your assigned role, whether that's the golden child or the black sheep, they'll keep you locked right where they want you. But the moment you step outside that script, I let out a sharp breath and shook my head. That's when they show you exactly how they feel. I heard a few uneasy shuffles from the crowd. People started exchanging glances. Olivia looked to Dad, clearly waiting to see his reaction before deciding how she should feel. Hunter, on the other hand, looked like he was enjoying the show, smirking like it was all just free entertainment. Stephanie? Still smiling, but her knuckles had gone white. I looked back at my dad, my voice softer now, but no less firm. I used to think that if I just worked hard enough, if I succeeded, if I played by the rules, if I proved myself, you'd finally see me differently. But now I understand. It was never really about me. It didn't matter what I did or didn't do. Stephanie opened her mouth, probably gearing up to interrupt me, but I didn't give her the chance. I turned back to my father. Because the truth is, I was never meant to succeed in your eyes, was I? I saw it, the flicker in his expression. Just a second of something real. I let it hang for a beat before exhaling and squaring my shoulders. But I did. I built something for myself. I made a life that has absolutely nothing to do with this family. And let me tell you, it's peaceful. It's fulfilling. And it's mine. I could see it in their faces, the uncertainty, the confusion. A lot of them had no idea what I was even talking about, but I was done letting them cling to the version of me that Dad and Stephanie had spent years crafting. Stephanie gave a nervous little laugh, desperate to take back control of the moment. Oh, please. This is ridiculous. It's just a name tag. I looked right at her. You're absolutely right, I said calmly. It is just a name tag, but it's also part of a pattern. A lifetime of subtle digs, little jokes, offhand comments, all designed to remind me that no matter what I do, in your eyes, I'll always be the disappointment. My dad finally cleared his throat and stepped forward. That's enough. I met his eyes without flinching. You're right, I said. It is. Then, before anyone could say a word, I reached for my glass one more time. I lifted it slightly, letting the silence stretch, letting the moment settle over the room. To the last time you'll ever see me. You could have heard a pin drop. My dad stiffened like I'd physically struck him. Stephanie's jaw dropped open, then snapped shut like she was trying to swallow her shock. Someone in the back whispered, "Wait, what?" And I didn't say a word. I calmly set my glass back down, turned around, and walked straight for the door. I could feel every eye on me, could feel the tension turn into panic as it sank in that this wasn't just a dramatic exit. This was final. This time wasn't like the others. I took one last look back before walking out, and for the first time in my life, it didn't feel like I was running away from a fight. It felt like I was walking towards something: freedom, peace, and the life I'd built outside of the toxic bubble they had tried to keep me in. The moment I stepped outside, I inhaled deeply. The cool air filled my lungs like a fresh start. It was done. I had finally cut the cord I should have severed years ago. No more pretending. No more trying to earn the approval of people who never cared unless I fit their version of who I should be. I drove home that night in complete silence, the weight lifting off me with every mile. And even later, sitting alone in my quiet living room, a small part of me couldn't help but wonder, did I go too far? Had I done the right thing? Was I being cruel? The next few days were a blur. My phone was flooded with texts and missed calls, all of which I ignored. I didn't open social media. I already knew it would be filled with whispers and fallout. After all, I'd walked out on my dad's birthday, publicly embarrassed him, humiliated Stephanie, who had spent years trying to push me to the edges of their picture-perfect world. The family group chat lit up like fireworks, but I didn't say a word. I wasn't ready to deal with the storm. Then a single message came through from my aunt, the only one who ever really got me. She asked, "Are you okay?" I stared at it for a while, not sure how to answer. Because truthfully, I was okay. Better than I'd been in years. But also unsure. Worn out. Changed. I told her I just needed time. She didn't ask for more. She simply said she understood. The next morning, my dad called. "Where are you?" he asked, using that same tone he always did. The one that somehow carried disappointment even when I hadn't done anything wrong. "I'm at home," I said. "And I'm not coming back." His silence said it all. "You can't just leave like this," he said after a pause. "We're family. We're supposed to stick together." I didn't hesitate. Not if sticking together means pretending to be someone I'm not. Not anymore. That was the last time we spoke. Weeks went by. I stayed away from everything: birthdays, weddings, holidays, whatever else they came up with. The rest of the family either sided with Dad and Stephanie or acted like none of it had ever happened. I heard through whispers that Dad was hurt, that Stephanie was furious, that Hunter and Olivia were embarrassed by what I did. None of that bothered me, because deep down, I knew I had finally done what was right for me. I was still living my life, still moving forward, still thriving. And even though it wasn't easy to cut them off, I felt a kind of peace I hadn't felt in years. I haven't spoken to anyone in the family since that night. So here I am, asking, am I the a-hole for walking out like that? For making that toast? For cutting them off completely? Did I go too far? Or was it about time I finally stood up for myself? I know I'll never be the daughter my dad wanted. I know I'll never get his approval. But maybe, just maybe, I've finally realized I don't need it. So, Reddit, you tell me, was I out of line? Or was this long overdue? If you connected with this story and want to hear more like it, don't forget to like and subscribe. And let me know down in the comments, do you think I went too far? Or did they have it coming?